The bustling airport terminal hummed with the usual chaos. Passengers hurrying to their gates, announcements echoing overhead, and the scent of fresh coffee mixing with the sterile, conditioned air. Among the crowd, an elderly woman stood near the check-in counter, her frail hands gripping the handle of a small, worn-out suitcase. Her silver hair was neatly combed back, and despite the exhaustion on her face, her eyes held a quiet warmth. She had been standing there for quite some time, shifting her weight uncomfortably, glancing around as if looking for help but too hesitant to ask. A few passengers noticed her, some even throwing a sympathetic look her way, but everyone was in too much of a hurry to stop. A flight attendant, tall and sharply dressed in a navy blue uniform, approached with a clipboard tucked under her arm. Her name tag read Lisa, and she carried herself with a kind of authority that left no room for nonsense. She barely spared the elderly woman a glance before looking down at her list. "Ma'am, you need to move aside. You're holding up the line," Lisa said briskly, her tone devoid of warmth. The old woman blinked up at her, shifting her suitcase slightly. I just need a little help. My boarding pass isn't scanning, and Lisa let out an impatient sigh. "Do you have a valid ticket?" "Yes, dear, I do. I printed it out, but the machine won't read it." The woman patted the pockets of her cardigan, pulling out a slightly crumpled boarding pass. She held it out with a hopeful smile. Lisa took it, barely glancing at it before shaking her head. "This is wrinkled. The scanner probably can't read it because of that. You should have kept it in better condition." The woman swallowed, embarrassment creeping into her expression. "I didn't mean to. Look, I don't have time for this." Lisa turned to a nearby airport staff member. "Can you deal with this?" The staff member, a young man with kind eyes, took the boarding pass and scanned it manually. A green light blinked, confirming its validity. "It works just fine," he said, handing it back to the woman with a reassuring smile. Lisa, however, wasn't pleased. Instead of backing down, she rolled her eyes. "Whatever. Just don't hold up the boarding process, all right?" The elderly woman nodded quickly, clutching her boarding pass as if it were the most precious thing in the world. She moved toward the gate, her steps slow but determined. As the plane began boarding, Lisa took her place at the entrance, greeting passengers with a tight-lipped smile. When the elderly woman reached the front, Lisa blocked her path. "Ma'am, are you sure you're fit to fly? You seem weak." "We can't have passengers needing medical attention mid-flight," Lisa said, her voice laced with forced politeness. The woman's face fell. "I'm fine, dear. I've flown plenty of times. I just need a little help finding my seat." Lisa glanced at the growing line behind her and sighed loudly. "We don't have time for this. Maybe flying isn't for you." A few passengers murmured in disapproval, but Lisa ignored them. Then, without waiting for a response, she gestured toward an airport security officer. "This passenger needs to be removed," she said firmly. Gasps rippled through the line as the security officer hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes. She's unfit to travel," Lisa snapped. The officer looked at the elderly woman, his face uncertain. But before he could argue, Lisa turned away, already dismissing the situation. The old woman's lip trembled as the officer gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, let's step aside for a moment." Passengers whispered amongst themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief. One man, standing further back in line, pulled out his phone and started recording. The woman sighed softly, her shoulders slumping. She clutched her suitcase and allowed herself to be led away, not saying another word. Lisa turned back to the rest of the passengers, forcing a bright smile. "All right, next." But what happened next changed everything. 5 minutes later, an announcement crackled over the airport intercom. A voice, calm yet firm, echoed through the terminal. "Attention all staff and passengers. A senior flight attendant is requested at Gate 14 immediately for an urgent personnel matter." Lisa frowned. What was going on? A man in a crisp suit, clearly a higher-ranking airline official, appeared at the gate. His expression was unreadable, but his presence alone was enough to make Lisa shift uncomfortably. "Lisa," he said evenly, folding his arms. "Step aside. We need to talk." Passengers leaned in, their curiosity piqued. And in front of everyone, Lisa's world was about to turn upside down. Lisa felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach as the airline official fixed his gaze on her. The murmurs from the passengers grew louder, some craning their necks to get a better view of the unexpected scene unfolding at the gate. The official, a man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor, glanced at the flight crew standing nearby. "Lisa, step aside," he repeated, his tone firm but controlled. Lisa straightened her posture, forcing a polite smile as she tried to maintain her composure. "Is there a problem, sir?" she asked, her voice lighter than she felt. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to the security officer who had removed the elderly woman just moments earlier. "Where is the passenger you escorted out?" The officer hesitated before responding. "She's still at the terminal, sir. She didn't cause any trouble." Lisa folded her arms, feigning confusion. "Sir, I was just ensuring passenger safety. She looked weak, and I made a judgment call. We can't have someone collapsing mid-flight." The official exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. "You made a judgment call," he repeated, as if weighing her words. "And you determined that an elderly woman with a valid ticket, who had already been cleared by security, was unfit to travel?" Lisa felt her face grow warm, but she forced herself to remain confident. "I was only thinking of the airline's best interests. If something had happened to her on board, we'd have been responsible." A voice from the crowd spoke up. "That's not what happened." Lisa's head snapped toward the source of the voice. It was the man who had started recording earlier. He held up his phone slightly, making it clear that he had evidence. "You didn't ask if she needed help. You barely gave her a chance to explain. And now you're acting like you were doing her a favor." The tension in the air thickened. More passengers started murmuring, and Lisa's stomach churned. The official remained silent for a long moment, then turned back to the security officer. "Bring her here." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "But sir, we're already boarding," she started, but he held up a hand to silence her. "We're not taking off until this is handled." Lisa pressed her lips together as the security officer walked off toward the waiting area. She could already feel the stares on her, the weight of judgment pressing in from all sides. Minutes stretched on, feeling longer than they were. And then, from around the corner, the elderly woman reappeared. She walked slowly, but there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty as she approached, but she did not seem angry or bitter. The official offered her a reassuring nod. "Ma'am, I'm terribly sorry for what happened. We're looking into this situation, and I'd like to personally ensure that you get on your flight without any further trouble." The old woman hesitated, glancing at Lisa before speaking. I didn't mean to be a bother. I just needed a little help." Lisa shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations pressing against her. The official turned to Lisa now, his expression unreadable. "You made a mistake," he said evenly. "And now you're going to take responsibility for it." Lisa swallowed hard, her confidence starting to crack. "Sir, Before she could say more, another airline employee rushed over, whispering something urgently into the official's ear. His face darkened slightly as he listened. Passengers leaned in, sensing that something bigger was at play. Finally, the official exhaled, rubbing his temple before addressing Lisa again. "I was just informed that this passenger isn't just any passenger." Lisa frowned in confusion, her mind racing. The old woman gave a small, almost knowing smile. "I didn't want to make a fuss," she said softly. The official's lips pressed into a thin line as he turned back to Lisa. She's one of our airline's retired senior flight attendants. She spent over 30 years in service, working flights just like this one. She dedicated her career to making sure passengers were treated with care and respect. And today, you kicked her off her own airline's plane. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Lisa's mouth went dry. The elderly woman's eyes held no malice, only quiet disappointment. "I know what it's like to be in your position," she said gently. "I know the stress of the job, the pressure to move things along. But kindness never slows things down, it only makes the journey easier for everyone." Lisa's heartbeat thundered in her ears. The passengers around her were whispering now, shaking their heads. She could feel her authority slipping away, the weight of her actions finally catching up with her. The official turned to her one last time. His next words sealed her fate. "Lisa, as of this moment, you are relieved of your duties. You can collect your things from the office. Your employment is terminated." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Lisa's world spun. "Sir, please." But he had already turned away, addressing the elderly woman once more. "Let's get you to your seat, ma'am. I'll personally see to it that you have a comfortable flight." Passengers clapped. Some murmured words of approval. Lisa stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. And just like that, in front of everyone, her career was over. Lisa stood there, frozen, as the weight of the moment pressed down on her. The murmurs of the passengers, the disapproving glances, and the slow realization that her career had just come to an abrupt end all swirled around her like a storm she couldn't escape. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her mind racing to find some way to reverse what had just happened. But it was too late. The decision had been made, and the humiliation of it all burned deep inside her. The elderly woman, still standing near the gate, looked at Lisa with an expression that wasn't filled with anger, but something worse, disappointment. Lisa had expected resentment, maybe even gloating, but the woman simply sighed softly and turned toward the airline official, accepting his offer to be escorted onto the plane. Lisa wanted to say something, to explain herself, to fight back, but every word she could think of felt hollow. The official didn't even look at her again as he walked away with the elderly woman, leading her toward the jet bridge. Passengers continued to whisper among themselves, shaking their heads. Some looked at Lisa with pity, others with disdain. The man who had been recording earlier tucked his phone away, exchanging looks with a few other travelers who had witnessed everything. The damage was done, and Lisa knew that whatever footage he had captured was probably going to be online within minutes. She took a shaky breath, her mind still struggling to process the last few minutes. Everything had unraveled so quickly. One moment she was in control, enforcing the rules, making a judgment call like she had done so many times before. The next, she was standing there like a lost child, her authority stripped away, her career in ruins. A quiet chuckle from behind made her tense. "Didn't think I'd see something like that today," a voice muttered. Lisa turned to see another flight attendant, one she had worked with before but never paid much attention to. A younger woman named Claire, known for her friendly demeanor and effortless way of handling even the most difficult passengers. She wasn't smirking or gloating, just watching Lisa with a mix of curiosity and something else Lisa couldn't quite place. Lisa swallowed hard. "This isn't fair," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it?" Lisa's jaw clenched. "I was just doing my job." She looked unfit to travel. "I was thinking about safety." "Or maybe you were thinking about efficiency," Claire interrupted, tilting her head slightly. "Moving things along. Keeping things in order." Lisa bristled. "That's part of the job, isn't it?" Claire didn't argue, but the look in her eyes said enough. Lisa knew that Claire had seen everything, how she had dismissed the old woman, how she had spoken to her without a second thought, how she had called for security without hesitation. Lisa felt a surge of frustration. You think I deserved this? She asked, her voice sharper now. Claire hesitated, then shrugged. I think we all have moments where we forget that people aren't just passengers. They're people. You just forgot at the worst possible time. Lisa exhaled sharply, her hands gripping the handle of the gate counter as if she needed something solid to hold on to. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She had worked hard for this job. She had been efficient, professional. She had followed the rules. And yet, in a matter of minutes, everything she had built had crumbled beneath her. Somewhere in the distance, the final boarding call echoed over the intercom. The flight she was supposed to be working was about to leave without her. For the first time in years, Lisa had no idea what to do next. She turned on her heel and walked away from the gate, her pulse pounding in her ears. Her mind was a mess of emotions: anger, embarrassment, confusion. But beneath it all, a small, nagging voice whispered something she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe she had forgotten that people weren't just passengers. Maybe this wasn't just about one mistake. And maybe, just maybe, this was the moment that was going to change everything. Lisa walked through the terminal in a daze, her mind replaying the moment over and over. The cold, matter-of-fact way the airline official had fired her. The disapproving looks from passengers. The way the elderly woman had simply sighed, as if Lisa's actions hadn't even surprised her. The further she walked, the more she felt the weight of it all sinking in. This wasn't just about losing her job. It was about something deeper, something that had been building for a long time without her even realizing it. She had always been strict, firm, in control. It was how she had climbed the ranks so quickly, how she had earned respect among her co-workers. Efficiency had always mattered more than emotions. If a passenger held up the line, she moved them along. If someone needed extra assistance, she made sure they didn't disrupt the flow of operations. She had thought of it as being professional. But now, standing there with nothing but the sound of airport chatter around her, she wondered if she had crossed a line she could never come back from. She pulled out her phone, half expecting a flood of messages from coworkers, maybe even a call from someone higher up, offering her a chance to explain. But there was nothing. Just the screen, glowing blankly. She sat down on one of the empty chairs near the large airport windows, staring out as planes taxied on the runway. She had spent years working inside those planes, enforcing rules, making sure everything ran smoothly. And now, she wasn't sure if she'd ever set foot on one again as a flight attendant. A movement in the reflection of the glass caught her attention. She turned slightly and spotted a group of passengers from her flight, standing near a cafe. They were talking in hushed voices, but she knew exactly what they were discussing. The man who had recorded the scene at the gate still had his phone out, scrolling through what was likely the footage. Another woman beside him shook her head, clearly upset. Lisa's stomach twisted. The story was already spreading. She quickly turned away, staring at her hands in her lap. Was this how everything was going to end? Would she become one of those viral stories? The disgraced employee who made a bad decision and paid for it in front of the whole world? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. And then, she heard a familiar voice. I didn't want things to go this way. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She turned and saw the elderly woman standing there, just a few feet away. She looked calm, but there was something in her eyes that Lisa couldn't quite read. Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but for the first time, she didn't know what to say. The woman sighed and took a seat on the bench beside her, setting her small suitcase down carefully. I worked for this airline for 30 years, she said softly. When I first started, I was young and eager, just like you. She glanced at Lisa. And I made mistakes too. Lisa swallowed, her throat tight. I used to think the job was all about control, the woman continued. Making sure things ran smoothly, following policies, keeping everything in order. But over time, I realized something. She paused, watching as another plane lifted off the runway. None of that matters if you forget why you're here in the first place. Lisa bit her lip, feeling a painful weight settle in her chest. You think I don't understand what happened back there, the woman said gently. But I do. I saw the way you handled the situation. And I've seen that look in the mirror before. Lisa turned to her, finally finding her voice. I didn't mean to be cruel, she said, barely above a whisper. The woman nodded, as if she already knew. But you were. The words hit harder than Lisa expected. They sat in silence for a long moment, the distant sounds of boarding announcements filling the space between them. Lisa wanted to defend herself, to explain why she had reacted the way she did. But deep down, she knew there was no excuse. Finally, the woman stood up, adjusting the strap of her handbag. I don't know what happens next for you, she said, looking down at Lisa. But I do know this. Losing your job doesn't have to mean losing yourself. Lisa looked up at her, her vision slightly blurred from the emotions she was barely holding back. The woman gave her one last, small smile. Take care, dear. And with that, she walked away, disappearing into the crowd of travelers heading toward the departure gates. Lisa sat there, unmoving. The woman was gone, but her words lingered, looping in Lisa's mind over and over. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about her job, or the humiliation, or even the passengers who had witnessed it all. For the first time, she was thinking about the person she had become. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she liked who she saw. Lisa remained seated by the terminal window, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The elderly woman's words echoed in her head, each syllable settling deeper into her conscience. She had spent so much time proving she was in control, enforcing the rules, that she had forgotten the most important part of the job, compassion. The realization sat heavy in her chest, but before she could fully process it, a new sound cut through her thoughts. A notification pinged from her phone. Then another. And another. Frowning, she picked up her phone and unlocked it. Her heart dropped. A video. The video. It had already made its way to social media, spreading faster than she could comprehend. The clip showed her standing at the gate, the elderly woman looking helpless, the security guard escorting her away. The caption was brutal. Flight attendant humiliates elderly woman, gets fired in front of everyone. Lisa's stomach twisted as she scrolled through the comments. She got what she deserved. Unbelievable. Some people shouldn't work in customer service. Good luck finding another job after this. Her hands trembled as she locked the screen, the weight of the internet's judgment crashing down on her. The reality of her situation had changed. This wasn't just about losing her job anymore. This was public. This was viral. And this was permanent. She could already imagine the consequences. Every airline she applied to would see this. Every hiring manager would Google her name and find this video. It was one thing to be fired, it was another to be labeled as the flight attendant who mistreated an elderly woman. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. She had spent years building her career, carefully crafting her reputation. And in a matter of minutes, it had all unraveled in the most humiliating way possible. She needed to get out of there. Lisa grabbed her bag and stood up, her legs unsteady. As she turned toward the exit, she nearly collided with someone. It was Claire. Lisa took a step back, her pulse still racing. Claire studied her, concern flickering across her face. I saw the video, she said softly. Lisa clenched her jaw, bracing herself for another lecture. But Claire didn't look smug or satisfied. She looked worried. Lisa, there's something you need to know, she continued, lowering her voice. That video? It's not just spreading, it's getting picked up by news sites. Lisa's stomach dropped even further. Claire hesitated before speaking again. And? She exhaled. There's more footage. Lisa's head snapped up. What do you mean? Claire glanced around, then leaned in slightly. Someone else was recording. from a different angle. It shows more than just what people saw at the gate. Lisa's mouth went dry. What does it show? Claire hesitated. It shows you hesitating. It shows that you didn't just throw her off the plane without a second thought. And it also shows. She glanced at Lisa's phone. That the first video was edited. It was cut in a way that makes you look worse than what actually happened. Lisa's mind reeled. Wait, you're saying someone deliberately made me look bad? Claire nodded. It's already out of control, but if people see the full video, they might realize the situation wasn't as black and white as they think. Lisa swallowed hard. This changed everything. If there was proof that the story had been twisted, maybe she had a chance to fix things. Maybe she wasn't doomed after all. But then another thought hit her. Who would edit the video like that? And why? She looked at Claire, her voice unsteady. Do you know who recorded the second video? Claire nodded slowly. Yeah. And he's still in the airport. Lisa's heart pounded. This wasn't over yet. Lisa's pulse quickened as she followed Claire through the crowded terminal. The weight of everything, the viral video, the humiliation, the possibility that someone had deliberately framed her, pressed down on her with every step. She didn't know what she was walking into, but one thing was clear. This was her only chance to set the record straight. Claire led her to a small seating area near one of the coffee shops. Lisa's eyes darted around until they landed on a familiar figure, the man who had been recording earlier. He was sitting with his phone in hand, scrolling through the very footage that had turned Lisa's life upside down. Lisa clenched her fists. She took a deep breath and walked straight toward him. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. The man looked up, surprised. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if he hadn't expected her to confront him. Then he leaned back in his chair, smirking slightly. "Didn't think you'd want to have a conversation with me after what happened." Lisa ignored the sinking feeling in her gut. "I know there's another video. One that shows the full story." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "And what if there is?" Claire stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Why edit the first one? Why make her look worse than what really happened?" The man chuckled, shaking his head. "You think I edited it? I just recorded what I saw." He held up his phone, tapping the screen casually. "Now, what people do with it after that, that's not my problem." Lisa felt a chill run through her. So someone else cut the video? Someone wanted to make sure only the worst part of it went viral. The man shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe people just love a scandal. Lisa's mind raced. If there was a second video, she needed to find the person who recorded it. But before she could say another word, Claire stepped in again. "Where did you see the full footage?" The man hesitated, then sighed. Some guy in the terminal was showing it to his friends. Said he caught the whole thing from a different angle. Looked like he was debating whether or not to post it. Lisa's stomach twisted. This was it. If that video got out, it could change everything. She turned to Claire, determination burning in her chest. "We need to find him." They hurried through the terminal, scanning faces, checking every row of seats, every cafe, every charging station. Minutes passed, but there was no sign of him. Then Claire grabbed Lisa's arm. "There." Lisa followed her gaze and spotted a man near the baggage claim area, leaning against a pillar, showing something on his phone to another passenger. Lisa didn't wait. She rushed over, her heart pounding. "Excuse me," she called out, and the man looked up startled. For a split second, Lisa feared he would walk away, but he didn't. He glanced at her, then at Claire, and then at his phone. "You're the flight attendant," he said, narrowing his eyes slightly. Lisa took a deep breath. "You recorded the full video, didn't you?" The man hesitated. "Yeah, I did." Lisa felt a surge of hope. "Can I see it?" He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "It's a long video," he said, unlocking his phone. "Shows everything, how you hesitated before calling security, how the old woman struggled but wasn't actually in danger, and how she even told the security guy she understood why you did it." Lisa's breath caught. "She said that?" The man nodded. "Yeah. The first video cuts all that out." He handed Lisa his phone, and she pressed play. Everything he said was true. The full footage showed the situation from a wider angle. It showed Lisa pausing, uncertain, before making the call. It showed the elderly woman explaining to security that she had been struggling to walk but wasn't upset. It showed context that had been deliberately erased. Lisa looked up at him, her voice shaking. "Why haven't you posted this?" The man shrugged. "Didn't want to get involved in internet drama. But I guess if the full truth should be out there, I could post it now." Lisa nodded, barely able to believe what was happening. "Please. People need to see this." The man pulled up his social media and uploaded the full video. Within minutes, comments started rolling in. "Wow, this looks completely different from the first video. She actually hesitated. This wasn't as cold-hearted as they made it seem. This is why you always need to see the full story before judging." Lisa exhaled, her body shaking from the emotional roller coaster. She didn't know if this would fix everything, but at least the truth was finally out there. And then, just as she was starting to feel a sense of relief, her phone buzzed with an unexpected call. It was from someone at the airline. Lisa stared at the screen, her heart pounding all over again. She had no idea what they were going to say. But whatever happened next, she knew one thing for sure: her story wasn't over yet. Lisa stared at her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. The name flashing across it belonged to someone from the airline, someone who still had the power to change the course of everything. For a split second, she considered ignoring the call, afraid of what they might say. But deep down, she knew she had to face it. Taking a steadying breath, she swiped to answer. "Hello." There was a brief pause before a familiar voice spoke. "Lisa, it's Mark from corporate. I assume you've seen what's happening online." Lisa swallowed hard. "Yes." Mark sighed. "Look, I'll get straight to the point. We acted quickly at the gate because we wanted to avoid a PR disaster, but now that the full video is out, well, things look different." Lisa gripped the edge of the chair. "So, what does that mean for me?" Another pause. "We want to talk. Can you come in tomorrow?" Lisa exhaled, her mind racing. "Yeah, I'll be there." After hanging up, she looked over at Claire, who had been listening closely. "They want to talk." Claire studied her for a moment. "That's a good sign." Lisa nodded, though uncertainty still churned inside her. The airline might have realized they acted too quickly, but that didn't mean they would just offer her job back. And even if they did, she wasn't sure if she wanted it anymore. As they walked back through the terminal, Lisa noticed something. The same people who had once whispered about her, who had stared at her in judgment, were now looking at her differently. Some nodded at her, a silent acknowledgement of the truth coming out. A few even gave her small smiles. The shift in energy was almost surreal. When she finally left the airport, the weight on her shoulders felt just a little lighter. The next morning, Lisa arrived at the airline's headquarters with her heart pounding. She had barely slept, running through every possible scenario in her mind. Mark met her in a conference room, along with a couple of senior executives. Their expressions were neutral, unreadable. Lisa sat down, bracing herself. "We've reviewed everything," Mark began, "and we realize now that we made a mistake in how we handled the situation." Lisa's breath caught, but she remained silent. "The way the first video was edited painted a picture that wasn't entirely fair," he continued. "We should have taken more time to understand what really happened before making a decision." Lisa waited, knowing there was more. "We want to offer you your position back," Mark finally said. "With full reinstatement, no penalties." The words should have brought her relief. But instead, Lisa felt something unexpected, a hesitation she hadn't anticipated. She had spent so much time thinking this was all she wanted, that if she could just clear her name, she could go back to the life she had before. But now, sitting here, she wasn't sure if she could. She thought about the elderly woman, about what she had said at the terminal, about how Lisa had spent years focused on the rules, efficiency, and control, forgetting the heart of the job. Maybe this was a chance to start fresh, to do things differently. Lisa took a deep breath. "I appreciate the offer," she said carefully. "But I need to be honest with myself. I think it's time for me to move on." Mark looked surprised. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes. This experience has made me realize a lot of things, and I think it's time for a new chapter." The executives exchanged glances, then Mark leaned back in his chair. "Well, I respect that. If you ever change your mind, you know where to find us." Lisa left the meeting feeling something she hadn't expected: peace. Over the next few weeks, the viral storm slowly died down. The full video had reshaped public perception, and while some people still criticized her, many others admitted they had judged too quickly. But Lisa didn't dwell on the opinions of strangers anymore. She took time to reflect, to figure out what she truly wanted. And then, she made a decision. One afternoon, she sat at a coffee shop, scrolling through job listings, when something caught her eye: an opening for a customer experience trainer at a hospitality company. A role that focused on empathy, service, and human connection. She smiled to herself. Maybe this was where she was meant to be. Lisa had lost her job that day at the airport. But in a way, she had found something much more important: herself.